Good morning, everybody. This is Javier Chavez here from KETIV Technologies, and we just want to welcome you to today's TechCast. And just before we get started, I want to make note of the Gotowebinar Panel. Right now, you guys are muted. However, if you guys have questions, feel free to take a look at the panel, look at the area where you have some questions. Or the chat bar where you can enter in some questions or ask some questions. We'll be happy to answer some of those. The other thing you might want to note is at the end we are going to have a Q&A session. So with that said, we're just going to go ahead and get started here, and we'll go ahead and get started just by talking about a little bit of what led up to this webcast and our series of webcasts, and I'll go ahead and try to explain some of that that's changing here at KETIV. So if you guys are familiar with AMA, this is an event that we started, approximately 7 years ago, live community event called Autodesk Manufacturing Academy, or AMA. And as a result, right, we've had, this legacy of events and relationships, due to these events. However, this is a large annual event, and it kind of coincided with the way our software was delivered, annual basis, but things are changing. So with that said, this is no longer the case with software. It's continuously changing, and it's not just the case for Autodesk, but a lot of other titles as well. So one of the things that our president highlighted in a blog post that you see there was this fact that things are changing, and even the way we learn is also changing. So for that reason, right, we decided to come up with the Virtual Academy. So another way to deliver training, and one of the things I like about it is the fact that you get to choose, pick and choose, out of 52 or so topics throughout the year, what you want to attend. And you can attend all of them, or you can just attend ones that specifically pertain to you, but you'll have that choice. So again, before we get into that, I just wanted to highlight some of that, and you can count on TechCasts like this happening basically every Thursday at 10 a.m. Okay, and with that said, you can also count on the fact that we'll have that it'll be short, quick training that you can go ahead and watch on a video, and typically access through a recorded mechanism as well. Okay, the other thing you're going to note are some of the topics are based on training and support requests. So this is still a community-driven event that you want to partake in, and this is typically things that come up as a result of people asking questions about new features, or like I said, support requests. Sometimes a new feature comes out, and maybe something changes drastically, and suddenly people don't know how to use the tool that they've been using for a number of years. So as an example, you could probably take a look and see that there's some upcoming TechCasts, and there's some more subjects there that you can probably take a look at. But you can count on some of these happening once a week. If you're not sure, which one is next, one of the ways that you can find out is by taking a look at our website. And wherever you're at on our website, there's a news pull down, and you can go to events, and you'll see the webinars that are coming up, or the TechCasts that are coming up. So keep those in mind, and if you'd like, KETIV Lifeline customers can be automatically enrolled or subscribed to these events, so that you can basically get an invitation early on in the process and know that you have a seat reserved for the webcasts. So keep that in mind. That's kind of what's leading up to this these TechCasts, and you'll start seeing these more often here. And for today, our objective today is to talk a little bit about the copy design tool. And so the copy design tool has recently undergone a change in how it works, the interface. And so we want to talk about two things: the traditional copy design tool and how it works, how to use it, how to leverage it. But also introduce you to some of the advantages of the new copy design tool. So some of the things you'll begin to notice right away, right, is that depending on what version of Vault you're on, you have two different versions. You have the traditional copy design, and so if you're working on 2015 and earlier versions of Vault, this is what you're normally used to. 2016 Vault Basic is still using the traditional copy design. So I think they basically at Autodesk decided to make this a feature of Vault Professional and Workgroup. And so if you look at the bottom half of the screen there, it also denotes that the same thing I just mentioned, which is that this is available through Vault Professional and Workgroup. So whichever tool you're using, I want to go ahead and try to get you familiar with either one. But obviously the highlight is the new version, and I think you'll see some good reasons to maybe migrate to the new copy design tool in one of the other versions. If you're on 2015 Vault Professional, there is a R2 version available for you that's available to subscription customers only. So keep that in mind. If you are ready to jump to the new copy design tool but not quite ready to make the jump to 2016, this is something that can be done. Okay. So let's take a look at just the interface. So traditionally, right, we can go ahead and take a look at the interface, and you have a place where you can basically right-click on any file inside of Vault and decide to make a copy of it. And typically when you copy a design, it's not just a file, it's a set of files. And so the copy design tool, when you do this, the interface that you see here. And so this interface shows you a number of things. It shows you the status of the file, whether you're copying it or you're going to decide to reuse some of the existing components. So there's several columns to show you that there. And then you have a place where you can decide where you're going to copy these files to, right? So at some point here today, we're going to go ahead and demonstrate this and show you this live in both versions. But right away, you'll see a new interface that maybe you're not familiar with. So in the new copy design interface, you're basically doing the same thing. You're finding a file you want to copy, and really it's a design. It's not just a file. So when you copy that design, all the files that show up here are related somehow to the file. And what's different about the new copy design environment is that you get some customization available, so you can decide to, add columns to be able to recognize files a little bit easier. The other thing you'll be able to do is copy more than one design at a time. Okay, so in the process, you might decide to apply a certain numbering scheme. So that's something that's available through the higher end versions of Vault, and this is something that's integrated into the new copy design tool. You can have it automatically number according to your organization's numbering scheme. So we'll take a look at that in just a little bit and highlight just some more features before we go on and take a look at this. So I mentioned the fact that you can copy multiple file sets, right? But the other thing you can do is also start to move these files into different folders. A lot of times, these new designs are similar but get categorized under a different project or a different group or a different product, and therefore need to be moved to different folders. Now, all this is possible with either of the two tools. The difference is with the traditional copy design tool, you have to do it manually and you have to do it afterwards. Okay. Again, with the traditional copy design tool, yes, you can copy multiple files. You just have to do them one at a time, and launch the tool, one at a time to copy those designs. Okay, so just some benefits there of the newer version of this. Okay, so the other thing you're going to notice too, I mentioned the auto numbering capabilities, right, of naming your files. We could also, work with properties and manage the properties as we create these new copies of the files. But I think probably the most significant change here is the fact that, with the traditional copy design tool, all the files get copied to your local drive. They get renamed and redirected, and links get corrected locally. So there's the latency there of copying all these files across your network to your hard drive and then putting them back. So if you're working with a newer version of copy design, right, the 2016 version in Vault Workgroup and Vault Professional, it all stays on the server, and it uses the server's resources to be able to make those changes. So that is fairly significant there. Okay, so with that said, let's go ahead and take a look and see what this actually looks like. And I'll start by opening up the traditional version of Vault here. I'm going to go ahead and open this up on the left-hand side of my screen. I'll go ahead and open up the Vault Professional version here on the right-hand side. So the traditional version, I'm going to go ahead and search for a file, and basically I want to copy this design. Now I intend to copy multiple designs. So here in the traditional version on the left-hand side, you know, I've found my design. It's this right here. It's this assembly, bell crank assembly front right-hand side. And so it's as simple as right-clicking and choosing copy design here. And this is the traditional copy design dialog. From here, I can go ahead and decide, okay, I'm going to copy this assembly, and there's some settings here you want to be aware of. Okay, so down at the bottom right, you'll find a button here for settings. Right. So once I go ahead and click on that, you're going to want to make sure that maybe, you know, if you're trying to get the drawings associated with some of these files, that you make sure you go ahead and check include related documentation. Okay. Typically, you know, some of these other ones are already grayed out. They're already being used. Include dependents, include library files. Of course, you're going to include those, but also include attachments. So if there were any Excel files attached or any Word documents attached to these files, these would also get included. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of this. I'm not going to make any changes. The other thing you're going to want to note, I'm going to go ahead and try and zoom in here and get a little bit closer, are some of the icons that show up next to these components. So this is an indicator of what's being copied. So right here, it already knows I'm trying to copy the assembly, and as a result, you know, upstream there's a drawing attached, and it knows that you know, if you're getting a new copy of the assembly, you're going to need a new copy of the drawing as well. Same thing with the IPN. So you look at those blue icons there, and that's telling you that it's going to copy. Anything yellow is going to get reused. So it's reusing this component. It's kind of hard to tell here what these components are, just because I don't have a description here column, and this is not customizable. So I can't add a description column to find out exactly what these are or get a description. So just keep that in mind when we go to look at the other versions of Vault, the copy design. Okay, so you'll also notice that, you know, in the columns here, I do have a new file name, and it's automatically just naming it the same name with a parentheses 2. So we can click here and rename this to whatever we want. In this case, I'm going to call this something similar, but I'm going to put the abbreviation here of LT. Okay, so LT and any other new files I have to also go and rename. A shortcut to this, and I'm going to go ahead and get a little bit down, go a little bit lower in the dialog box. We can put a suffix naming scheme. So we can come up with our own naming scheme, put a space here, and type in that same LT suffix that I added. And once I apply that, right, I can come back and take a look at any of the new files, right, and they all have that same LT naming scheme applied. Okay, so at any point, if I decide, you know, I need a new file such as this one, I can go ahead and just click on the bubble. It changes to copy. It now becomes a new file. Everything else will get reused. Okay, if I go back up to the very top, some other things I want to notice is that it's copying the files to the exact same location where the source files were at. So if I decided, you know, all these new files go in a new folder, I can go ahead and click the Browse button and decide where in my vault these new files go. Right. So I'm going to go ahead and create the folder right here. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and indicate that I want to copy these files to that LT design folder, and so all the new files will be going into that folder. All the other files will remain in the same location. You could see some of that here in the dialog. So you can see the path here versus, you know, the original path of some of these other components. Okay, so let's zoom back out here, right? And once I'm ready, I can simply click OK, and it's going to go ahead and do what it needs to make all these files copy over. Right. So once all these files copy over, right, I'm left with a new folder and some new files in there. It did have to copy all those files locally, and I'm going to basically do something very similar here in Vault Professional, okay, and use the copy design tool here. So you can see side by side that, you know, everything looks fairly similar. This time I'm going to go ahead and look for a file called Pedalbox, and I know I want to make a new version of this assembly. I'm working maybe on an initiative that calls for multiple, you know, designs to get revised and changed to make things a little bit more lightweight. So over here, I'm right-clicking. So far, this looks the same, and I'm going to go to the Copy Design tool. This is where things change a little bit. Okay, so here's the new Copy Design tool. And before I do anything, you know, I'm going to go up to the top set of components. And I always, you know, I like the ribbon interface in a lot of our tools because it goes left to right. And this is very similar. You start off with the left, and there's some settings here. We have a drawing view that'll basically show us any drawings that are connected to this file, and so far there are none, so I don't see anything necessarily happening or changing here. Okay. But when I do click on the pull down, I also have access to numbering schemes, so I can decide, you know, what numbering scheme to apply as I go ahead and create new parts. So we have a mono part numbering scheme that we're going to go ahead and apply, and you'll see once we start to create new files, they'll automatically get named according to this mono part numbering scheme. Okay. Some other settings there: automatically copy parents. Sure. Link drawings and model, absolutely. So with that said, just before I do this, I'm going to pause here for just a moment and attach maybe a PDF to this design. Okay, and you'll see it'll basically get copied over. So I'll go ahead and maximize this screen so that we can see it a little bit better. And let's go ahead and attach a Non Cad file and just make sure that we can work with those as well. And I'm just going to do a quick search for a PDF. I know that's in here. Okay, so there's a PDF here, this front rocker report that I want to go ahead and attach to this. And when I click OK, it shows up in the list. I can attach multiple files to that assembly. I'll click OK, and you'll notice, right, now when I select this assembly and I click on Uses, I can see all the parts it uses on the bottom half of the pane, but I can also see that PDF. That PDF is now something that travels and goes along and is related to the this assembly. So with that said, if I go ahead and launch the Copy Design tool now, okay, I can take a look at this and maybe scroll down and also see that it's also capturing the PDF that goes along with it. Okay, so in addition, we said, you know, we can copy multiple files at the same time, whether they're connected or not. So at the top, the next button over lets me add more objects or designs. So I'm going to go ahead and add another design here. I'm looking in this folder here for a bell crank assembly, and so I'm going to go ahead and select this bell crank assembly. And so, you know, when I collapse this first design, right, I'm looking at the two designs that I decided to copy, and it's just the assembly and all the components attached to it. But if you guys remember when I first looked at this, I said we're going to go ahead and click on this pull down and take a look at what else we can do. We can go ahead and show the drawings and make sure that those get copied as well. So I know it's an assembly, but it's got some documentation that goes along with it, and I'm going to go ahead and click on this, and you'll see that a few new things showed up here. So just to make things easier to look at, I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on this. Okay, and so the original assembly, or one of the assemblies that I chose, was this bell crank assembly, and you can see we've captured the drawing that goes with it. Okay. In addition, some other drawings showed up. Well, if I take a look at this assembly, this bell crank assembly, there is a part here that ends with 1006, and guess what? It's got a drawing that goes with it too. So there's a drawing that documents this, and it shows up here as part of the documentation. So when I decide I want to copy something, it's going to be as simple here as right-clicking and deciding, I want to copy this this design or that design. So we'll go ahead and start going through that process now. Okay, I'll start at the top, and I'm going to go ahead and copy. And right away, I have the choice of copying it, leaving it in place where it's at, but I'm going to choose Copy To and put it in a new folder. So I'm going to go ahead and click New Folder here. Okay, and you'll notice that the name changed, and this is according to a naming scheme. Okay, and of course it will get put in that folder, and I can go ahead and expand and decide, what else needs to get copied or new as a result of making this assembly a new design. Okay, so if I go a little bit further, I'm going to do the same thing with the assembly, the bell crank assembly. And by the way, the only way I can kind of tell what these are is because this description box was something that was customized here. So again, I'll go ahead and zoom in on this. This makes it real easy to tell what I'm looking at. And so, I can get rid of these if we need to, right? But this is basically how I add more columns. So I can right-click and choose columns and decide, what column I want to go ahead and add in. So if there's comments or something that'll help me identify these a little bit easier. In this case, I added in the description and a part number column, and that helped me add these in as well. I might want to know who created these. So I'm going to go ahead and add the author here. And you can see there's now names or of the authors or whoever created these. So this is now customizable, so I can go ahead and be able to tell and identify what I'm changing a little bit more easily. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and continue making copies to some of these objects. And in this case, I'm going to go ahead and copy this as well, right? And when I copy the assembly, it knows to copy the drawing. Okay, that's one of the settings that shows up, right? Automatically copy parent, so that's why it knows. It's going to go ahead and copy that. If I decided for some reason this new version of this design doesn't get a specific component, so let's just say this fastener is not going to be part of this, and we already know this new design is going to not utilize this, we can go ahead and exclude it. So suddenly, when we're done with this, I'll have a copy of that design with a new numbering system or a new naming convention applied, and this one part will be missing because it doesn't require it. So a lot of things we can do here. I'm going to go ahead and zoom back out and show you the rest of the dialog. Now, on the right-hand side, we have this pane, and there's a number of things we can see here. We can start with the very bottom, and it changes the view. Okay, this is the numbering scheme for some of the new files. And so if I take a look at some of the new files, the numbering scheme is got some letters attached to it, and then it's got some sequential numbering. So depending on what category this is in, so if this is a chassis component, right, it now renumbers that or renames that so that it has a CH in the naming convention. So we'll go ahead and take a quick look at that and zoom in a little bit closer. But it did that according to this numbering scheme. So if I decide that these are brake components and I click away there, again it renumbers it to put this BR numbering scheme in there, and then a sequential number, whatever's next. Okay. So looking back at the bottom here, there's ways we can go ahead and click on a component and see where it's used before we copy it. That way, we're doing our due diligence before we reuse it. We can find out where it's being used and decide maybe this needs to be a new copy as well. Okay. Under actions here, we get lots of choices. We can go ahead and filter and see what's being copied, okay, what's being reused, and there's a ton of parts being reused in assemblies. We can also replace components. So it's possible to right-click and say, okay, I don't want this fastener. I want to go ahead and replace it during the copy process with a different size fastener or maybe a different material fastener. So nothing happening there in terms of replacing anything. But then, if you guys remember, during the process of deciding how to copy this design, we decided we were going to exclude a fastener. So that's showing up in the list. Okay. The other thing that this gives us visibility to is as to where these files are going. So some of these files I decided to copy, and right away, early on in the process, I decided to copy the pedal box assembly and put it in this lightweight design folder that I created. And so right away, I can take some of the other copies and just drag and drop them in the folder, right? And they become part of that folder there. And get placed there so that I can kind of organize myself while I'm making these copies. Okay, so after all that is done, I mean, there are some more options here. There are tools to basically copy everything or just copy the top nodes. There are some options here to create rules on how things get copied. But for the most part, if you use it out of the box, you get this type of functionality that we see here. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and tell it to go ahead and start creating that copy of these designs. And you can see I've got green checks here where it's finished successfully copying some of those files. Okay, so the way this gets used, I mean, I used to get markups, and sometimes I used to give markups basically showing red lines all over paper saying, okay, we're going to create a new product. It's just like this, but it gets a new part number. Right, and basically the drafter designer that I handed this to would basically open up the drawing, do a save as, change the part number, and then he would, you know, follow the markups accordingly. So this is kind of what this is doing. All these drawings are ready to go so that you can start changing the models behind them and updating the drawings. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and come back to our PowerPoint presentation for just a moment. Right, and I'd like to go ahead and maybe open this up for Q&A. So I'm going to take a quick look at some of the chat and see if there's some questions there. Okay. And I see a couple questions here. Let me go ahead and make sure I can see those. A little hard to see on my screen. Okay, so on the first copy design, somebody asked, I think Ben asked, you know, what were the two alerts that showed up. I think I had copied maybe or chosen to copy a library file that was locked. So I think that was what you saw earlier. Okay. And does this work for AutoCAD Electrical? So another person had asked a question regarding AutoCAD Electrical, and the answer is depending on how you use AutoCAD Electrical. If you're using it with projects, I believe there's another workflow that should be used with AutoCAD Electrical. If you're using AutoCAD Electrical with separate individual drawings and you're not using an AutoCAD Electrical project, then the answer is yes. You basically right-click on those files, decide to copy the design, and you can create an entire, you know, new set of drawings. And I think another question that's come up, okay, there's a user who's using 2015 R2. And R2 was the first time that we got exposed to this technology, and to me, whenever I see an R2 version on subscription, it's a preview technology that, you know, they're giving us access to as a benefit of subscription. So you're looking at the first release of the newer copy design tool. And so one of the tools, from what I understand, is not working. I don't know if you're updated on service packs, but there are specific service packs for R2, a few that have come out. So the first thing I would do is probably take a look at those and see if any of those address the exclude option. Okay. And another comment that came up is somebody's R2, 2015 R2 for Vault Professional is using an older copy design. So you do have the option of using the older copy design. An administrator can decide, you know, we're just going to use the older copy design, and there were other benefits of R2, and they can force, you know, users to use the older copy design. But at the same time, that can be re-enabled. Okay, so I'm going to just check the queue here for a few more questions. Right, and it looks like that's pretty much it, unless I see something else pop up. But with that said, guys, I'd like to thank you for your time, and I'd like to also encourage you to do to take a look and see, you know, what other webcasts are coming up next. Right, and there's a few places you can kind of take a look at and see, you know, some of the upcoming events. There's links there that you can see on the screen there to our blog. I mentioned on our website that you can go to the events pull down and take a look at some upcoming webcasts. And somebody had also asked, you know, is this format to take over the place of the larger AMA event? Yes, that is the case. And this will be what we call, you know, the virtual academy. And at least for this year, we're not doing the AMA event. So somebody also explained, you know, how do you copy the design without auto numbering? So in the first dialog box, and I'll be glad to show that here, when you do the copy design, you get to decide here whether you're going to apply a numbering scheme or not. And so if you were doing this just before, you know, choosing to use the copy or right-clicking on these files, you can uncheck these, right, and decide none. Right, and so if you choose none, then you're not using a numbering scheme, and from here on out, when you decide to copy something, it's up to you as to how you want to number these. Yeah, and something, a comment that was made, important to have the right column shown. Absolutely, I totally agree with that, which is something you just couldn't do with the traditional copy design tool. So I've added the description, I've added the part number, so I can keep an eye on those and make sure that those, you know, some of these change accordingly, or I'm selecting the right components to start off with, and that happens when you right-click. You can add whatever columns are relevant to you. All right, guys, so that will conclude the presentation. And of course, if you guys have any other questions here, you're more than welcome to give us a quick email. You can contact me at javier.chavez@ketiv.com. Thanks again.